Talking to my good buddy Jake the other day, and he was talking about basically his experience of using an amplifier live with in-ear monitors, and this kind of got me thinking about this whole subject a little bit and what it is, because I don't think it's necessarily a modeling thing that is why we end up not really liking the sound of like direct tones. You know, the experience of sticking an SM57 in front of an amplifier and hearing that in your in-ears, kind of one spot right in the middle of your head, is not really anything like playing an amp in the room. And I think that's something, you know, that we get used to in the modeler world, is, you know, our sounds being pretty much direct down the center, and then maybe you get some ambience around the side. But in this video, I wanted to explain to you how Allan Holdsworth kind of solved for this issue a while ago, and how we could take some of these learnings from Allan and apply them to our own HELIX tones. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. I was originally doing this with Fractal, and I thought, let's do this with HELIX. I've put these into a separate Gumroad folder because it's extra work. I hope some of you guys will find some use with these tones, but basically I've put a handful of tones in there already, and I'm going to keep growing this folder. It's going to be £5 for these as always, but you'll be able to hopefully watch this video and try some of these things yourself. I'm not going to give the whole thing away necessarily, but I will talk about what the principles are going to be. So if you put an amplifier in a room and you stand in a room, depending on where you are standing in the room, you get quite a different sound. This is one of the good and bad things about an amplifier, but it is one of the things about an amplifier, right, that we get reflections off of other spaces. Now, it's not just straightforward smooth reverb. In fact, you are very rarely in a space where you would hear like lots of reverb, right, unless you're playing in like a hall or a church. You know, you get these shorter reflection times, especially like in a room or a studio like this. This is a room. So reverb doesn't necessarily solve our problem as much. So what Allan Holdsworth used to do, he had this harness thing that he called it, like an amp harness, and he would record tones direct in the studio, and necessarily this must have been something that he kind of noticed for himself. And if you look through his UD Stomp, so the ultimate delay, the Yamaha delay pedal that he was really key in designing, essentially what he did was create a bunch of presets for that, which would kind of open and make more alive these direct tones, these tones that are coming just from one microphone. What putting a microphone in front of an amp kind of does is gets rid of a bunch of other information, but also narrows a 360 sound down to kind of one spot. Right? The Boss Wazza Airs kind of solve for this as well by putting you in a space. So what I wanted to do with these presets is essentially I'm using a multi-tap delay, and I'm going to spread the sound so that we get some reflections left and right. That's basically the simplest explanation for it. I'm not going to go into too much detail with it because it's giving the whole game away. I'm actually going to build some slightly more complex presets for HELIX as well. I want to try that as well, but jump into the folder and try it. If you think this might work for you, I feel for me that I'd end up practicing for far longer if I was using headphones with this kind of tone rather than that one that's right down the middle. I know that's true of using the Wazza Airs, for example, that once you put yourself in a bit of a space with it, you actually get far less fatigue. Not only that, but last night I was finding some of these tones to be some of the most inspiring tones that I've heard kind of back recorded on my DAW, and it's like, well, actually that sounds more like an amp in a space to me, and it's not just, this kind of microphone IR sound in the middle of a massive hall, which doesn't necessarily always make things sound much more real. It's kind of something different going on here, right? Jump into the Gumroad folder if you want to try these out. I've put together a few presets, a handful of them so far, that you could try if you want to check those out. I'll keep putting stuff into this folder, and you'll get a Google Drive link as well as the zip folder, so that you can keep coming back and enjoying these tones for yourself. But yeah, I think it's a thing that Allan Holdsworth for sure kind of solved, and I think this is an element that maybe we could think about, because I think you probably wouldn't necessarily want to do this live, although Allan Holdsworth did. You wouldn't want to do it live on stage necessarily, but front of house maybe you might, if they were running in stereo. If you collapse these things down to mono, they're going to sound particularly, maybe a little bit less convincing. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I think this is a bit of a tone secret to amp in the room tones if you're looking for that sort of thing. You wouldn't always want to record with amp in the room tones, but certainly practicing with them, if you're used to playing with an amp in the room, could be a huge factor.